Hello and welcome to the Chess on Toast game of the day. My name's Nick Murphy. With me, as always, International Master Lorin D'Costa. So Lorin, before we start, just remind all the viewers that we have, of course, got some new DVDs available. We have 3 brand new DVDs out, making 6 in total, and you can check out and buy them, get all the information about our DVDs at www.chessontoast.com. Okay, so that's the advert out of the way. Lorin, what game are you going to show us today?
Right, so today Chess on Toast is going to do a bit of an endgame special, Nick. What are your endgames like?
Really bad.
Right, okay, well that's interesting you say that, because that's exactly why I want to show this game. This is another Magnus Carlsen game. Because guess what, he's built up a head of steam, hasn't he? He started to actually remember to win games, which is quite weird to say about the world number one.
He'd drawn each of his first 4 games,
that's
so
right.
We all thought it was going to be a bit boring from him. But
no, but of course not, since even though he's drawn, he still thinks, well, I'm the best player in the world at the moment, why not continue to play the way I know I can? And he wins his second game in the road today, which was yesterday against Radjabov. Now, Radjabov being one of the stars of the modern game, but he's had a bit of a rough patch, hasn't he?
He has. He was recently at the London Candidates Tournament that I was actually working at, and he lost a lot of games and a lot of rating points.
That's right. So it's fair to say he's not on the best form, but here, exactly the same thing happened in their game here. It got to an endgame, and Carlsen managed to outplay him in this endgame. So we're not going to really focus too much on the opening. I will just comment on Carlsen's first move, which is called the...
I want to say that's the English opening.
That is the English.
The Norwegians playing the English opening.
I know. Do the English play Norwegian openings? I don't know.
we haven't. I don't think we've done a video starting C4, have we?
Ooh.
Oh,
it could be a while here before we try and work that out.
It's not one that we do very often.
No.
Certainly,
I mean, the idea is quite simple, because when you first show openings to juniors and improving players, Nick, you tend to focus on E4 because we like to say that there are open positions.
Yeah. Whereas
C4 is a kind of closed position, but it does do the honourable thing of sort of attacking the centre in this way. It's very similar to the Sicilian defence, for anyone who plays that, which is one of my favourite openings, which is that. And that's also doing the same thing, isn't it? To try and control a centre square with a wing pawn. So that is the reason why the English opening is quite popular. Now, Black, of course, has many different moves here, but Radjabov played C5. That's called the symmetrical English. Why do you think that is?
Because they've done it symmetrically.
They've done it symmetrically. Now, normally in the English, White plays the following plan. He plays G3 and Bishop G2. We've talked about that a lot.
The fianchettoing the bishop.
Fianchetto. And again, the idea is to focus on these squares, and White will play Knight C3 again to focus on those squares in yellow. So in any opening, as long as you control 2 of those 4 squares in the centre, it's probably going to be okay, isn't it?
Okay, yeah.
So, without commenting too much on the opening, and now White played E3, so Carlsen completely abandons this G3 idea, which is the normal English, and he instead played E3.
It shows you can. We've talked about this many times. There's always, very often, several good moves in a position.
Exactly. And what we're going to see is Carlsen's approach, which is, do you know what? I don't need to study thousands of variations and spend hours a day doing that. Of course he does, but the approach for the other players is to try and get an advantage in the opening. But here at Chess on Toast, we advocate the kind of ideas behind the openings rather than just memorising actual theory, isn't it, Nick?
That's right, yeah.
And here Carlsen just says, do you know what? I think I can beat anybody in the world by just getting my pieces out and obeying all the opening rules. And watch what happens. Both sides develop their pieces and castle early. So this is the kind of position that, as a chess teacher, I'm always telling my pupils, get your pieces out early, don't move your queen out too early, castle early. And guess what? The best players in the world are doing that. So whether it's a position like this that you've never seen before, or it's one of the positions that you do know in any one of your openings, that's the basic rules. So we're just going to go through quite quickly these moves. Just to say, that pawn there has got a special name. What's it called?
I want to say it's an isolated pawn.
It's an isolated queen's pawn, that's right. And we say that because there are no pawns on either side that can come forward and protect it. So we say that pawn is potentially weak. Now, I'm not here to do a lecture on that, because that would be a lecture in itself.
Yeah. But
suffice to say that Black now has to defend that pawn with pieces rather than with pawns. So that's what Carlsen's trying to do. And in fact, he then changes the pawn structure. Again, that's for something else, that's for another day. But now this pawn is the target rather than this one.
Okay.
So
because the one that we talked about as isolated is actually now protected.
That's right.
Yeah.
But instead, after Rook C1, we can see what Carlsen's trying to do.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just going to sort of skirt through these moves because I really want to get onto the middle game, sort of the end game position. And both sides kind of develop sensibly. A lot of pieces come off, which makes the position look kind of drawish, but that's not really the idea in this position. Again, it's like a huge hoover's just been applied to the board. And I'm kind of getting to the position now which I wanted to reach, Nick, which was this position. And what's your view on this?
Well, at the moment, they're roughly equal on material. They've got 5 pawns each, 1 rook each, and they've got a bishop and a knight, and we know that bishop and knights are pretty much equal in value. So this is an endgame, obviously. The kings are both still castled behind their original pawns. The only thing I would say here is that white has what you call 2 pawn islands, so it's got those 2 connected pawns on the left-hand side of the board and 3 connected pawns on the right-hand side of the board, whereas black has 3 pawn islands. It's got those 2 unconnected pawns on the left there, on the a5 and c5. So I would say because they can't protect each other, they may be a little bit weaker, so I would prefer white in this position.
Right, excellently said, surprisingly. Sorry, did I say that out loud? Right, what I've highlighted there in colour, in the green and the yellow, is the whole idea of pawn islands, and that was well said. That white's structure, pawn structure, is slightly better. Another thing I want to comment on is the bishop against knight. Now, this is something that it's very difficult to explain. It's very difficult to understand for most chess players. Which positions in the endgame are the bishop and the knight good and bad? So what do you think about that?
Well, if there were lots of pawns and it was all closed up, then that's when I prefer the knight. But if there's less pawns and lots of open diagonals, then I prefer the bishop.
Exactly. So we say that the knights prefer closed positions because they can hop in and out of squares, whereas the bishop prefers open positions because, as you said, it can go along diagonals. But what would you class this position as?
See, I would actually, although the bishop is a bit squashed behind that pawn at the moment, I would actually say this is an open position because there's lots of open lines and lots of open diagonals.
Right, but the problem is that pawn on c5 there in green is kind of in the way. Do you think if black could exchange that pawn off, for example, say for
I think black would be very happy to exchange that pawn off for one of the white pawns.
Right. So that's actually what black's trying to do, but unfortunately that square there is heavily guarded, isn't it? So black's never really going to be able to go c4. So let's see what happens. Now, by the way, before we go any further, do you think the kings should stay where they are? Or...
Well, early on in the game, we always say that the king should castle early and stay safe behind that wall of pawns. But as I said, this is clearly an endgame. The queens have come off the board. A lot of the pieces have come off the board. So the king can now come out into the centre without quite as much danger, because there aren't as many pieces to attack it, and actually join in the attack.
That's right. Well,
or the defence.
Or the defence. Yeah, it could be either, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So it's funny you should say that, because actually this week I was giving a lecture, sort of an endgame class to some talented pupils, Nick. And one of them said, you're not doing endgames, they're so boring. But isn't it ironic that the part that chess players in general, strong or weak, need to improve on is the endgame, because it's all about calculation. And but you're completely right about the king, and I've just highlighted there in green the sort of king ideas to bring the king into the game is what both sides could be doing, and it tends to go towards the centre. Although what I would say, Nick, is you've got to decide now, where the kings are immediately here, which side of the board do you want your king? Because remember, the king is such a slow piece that if you go to the queen side, go, no, hang on a minute, I wanted to go the other side, it's going to be far too slow, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So I think, though, over the coming moves, we see both players... Now, black played a4, which is quite a risky move. But the point about that move is that black would like to exchange off a couple of pawns, isn't it? Because then we're going to try and free that bishop on a7. So after takes rook d4, it's very difficult, well, in fact it's impossible for white to hold that pawn. And black did the maxim of putting the rook behind the passed pawn, which is an excellent idea for rooks to be doing in the endgame. Now, Carlsen played rook d2, and he said this is a bit of a one-mover. He didn't believe that Radjabov was going to fall for his next move, which was...
that you could do a back rank mate?
That's right, so white's actually threatening to go checkmate. He said he felt a bit bad about that because, at the top level you don't really want to be doing moves like that, whereas at your level, Nick, you might play cheeky moves like that to try and hope that in time trouble they might miss it. But of course Radjabov isn't going to fall for that, and he went king f8. Sometimes we say that you want to go h6 to provide a flight square for the king that way, but we've just spoken about how the king doesn't want to go that way in this position, in this endgame. He wants to go towards the centre, so king f8 is slightly more accurate. And black ended up regaining the pawn eventually, like this. But now white managed to put the knight on c4, and this is quite a clever idea with this knight manoeuvre like b2 to c4. Because now, in this position, that c-pawn is completely blocked. And didn't we say that black would like to try and get that out of the way?
Yeah, which wanted to advance that c-pawn and to free up that bishop.
That's right. And now both sides have got something here in the colours. What pawns are they? What are they called?
Well, they're both passed pawns, because there's no opposing pawns either in front of them or directly on either side of them to stop them.
That's right, and we say that knights are excellent blockaders of passed pawns because the knight can still sort of attack different squares, whereas the bishop is not really going to be a great defender or protector of the passed pawn here on a2. The problem for white is he can't actually get it moving anywhere, can he?
Sure.
So this is kind of the plans for both sides, and here we see both of them bringing their kings in just like this. A3. That's a nice move because although Carlsen might have accidentally touched the pawn and had to move it, but we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt here and say that he really did mean to do that. And the point about that move is that the knight protects it, so all of white's pieces are harmonious. Does that make sense?
So
the fact
they're all working together. Yeah, everything seems to be sort of protecting everything else.
If you watch any Grandmaster game, and any game at all between Grandmasters, what you'll find is that one of the players, or probably both of them, will have their pieces all defended like this, and this is quite really good strategy from because it means that you're not really likely to blunder or lose anything, are you?
No. It makes it very difficult for your opponent to really sort of hit at any weaknesses because your position's so solid.
That's right. Now what Carlsen does is he does this let's wait and see strategy. So black, he just kind of watch Carlsen just move his rook backwards.
So he just moved it backwards and forwards.
Well, it appears like he's not really doing anything, but what he's trying to do is make black move his rook. And also, he was trying to this is a strategy, to try and get black to actually move these pawns, because it looks like black's made a lot of progress.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen is that pawn can end up being a target.
Right.
If we just imagine that this bishop on a7 equals on d4, I think this would be completely different.
Yeah.
Because the bishop would be active, it would defend its own pawn,
yeah.
The base of the pawn chain there on the king side, and it would just be on a really good square. So the problem for black is he can't really get that into the game.
That bishop's been stuck there for a long time now, hasn't it?
That's right. He tries to get it back into the game, but now rook e7. I think he could have gone bishop e5 here, but I don't know. I feel like the bishop doesn't have to be taken. You can just sort of wait. So instead he went bishop f4, but the bishop again isn't really doing anything, is it? And
he's taken a lot of time just to get the bishop into a better position.
That's right. But it's not really a better... Well, it is a better position, but it's not really doing anything.
But it's not still a great position.
That's right. And Carlsen's idea now with this king walk was to play a4, so he's slowly trying to get that pawn going and saying to black, well, go on, you do something, because I don't really know what you're going to do. And 8g4. Now, I've got to say, this is sort of club player move, which looks really threatening, but is black going to crack through that king side there?
No, I mean, it looks as though there isn't really a way to, because if black takes the pawn, that's going to be it's going to be blocked by the other white pawn, and if white now takes the pawn, you still can't really advance the black pawn. So I think at the moment you're not going to make any headway on that side of the board.
And the problem is that the black rook is not active. This is the one key thing to remember in endgames, Nick. You've got to get your pieces active, and mainly you've got to get your rooks active. Rooks do not like to be passive. So that rook at the moment is just sort of trying to hinder white's a pawn, isn't it? That's not really what it should have been. So the white rook, on the other hand, do you think that looks quite a decent rook?
It looks ready to... Yeah, I mean, it's sort of cutting the centre in half, sort of stopping black's king going over to attack those white pawns, and also ready to go to either side of the board that it's called to.
That's right. And if it ever manages to go that way, it could harass the black pawns on the king side. So all in all, I think white's slightly better. And this is the kind of position that Carlsen was trying to aim for. So here we see black achieve nothing on the king side. And he finally got his rook active. But the problem now is that this allows the white pawn to advance. So it's a bit of a dangerous game now from Radjabov.
You can see white's pass pawn is advancing, whereas black's pass pawn isn't making any progress at all.
Yeah, that pawn is I don't even think we've talked about that pawn for the last 10 minutes, have we? It's just kind of sat there, being heavily blockaded by this knight, and I don't really know what black's plan is here, apart from to put the rook behind the pass pawn, which is what Radjabov does. Yeah. Obviously, he knows his endgame theory. But that's really the only thing that black can try and do. And it's kind of the expert technique that Carlsen shows here. In fact, he allows this check, which looks a bit dangerous, because after king c3 it looked like Radjabov had a skewer. So has he just made a mistake here?
Well, it certainly looks like it. I mean, it looks like the king has to move, and then you can just take the knight.
Well, the problem is, if we take the knight, what can white do to trick black back?
Oh, right, yes, you could check the black king.
Right, but we don't lose the rook, though, because we can go here and counter-attack on you. Has Carlsen missed something? I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say that no, he probably hasn't missed anything, but I can't see what it is.
Well, this is the kind of high-level tactics
Sure.
that I'll play the next move, and maybe it'll make it a bit more.
Well now the white king picks up that black pawn unless.
Well, we're pieced down though in green. Look, black's got a bishop and we don't.
Well, yes, but you could advance your pawn, and the bishop can't stop it queening.
Because that pawn is on the queening square. The square where the pawn wants to get to next is called the queening square.
The last square that the bishop could get it to.
That's right.
It's not going to be able to reach it.
Although I had people yesterday tell me that he thought, why should it be called the queening square since you can call it anything? Why don't you call it the rook square? I didn't really have an answer to that. But
Missing the point slightly.
Yeah. So that would be winning for white, wouldn't it? Because although black's winning by a bishop, white's going to end up queening. So after rook d1 check, king e2, rook a1, the white king's been driven away from the queen side, hasn't it? Which is the sort of this side of the board.
Yeah, was doing a job to protect that pawn.
But surprisingly enough, it's still really dangerous for black, because after rook g7, and this was a really classy move, because if rook takes a6, you can actually see the difference in the tactics between the strong players and ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it looks like black's just won the pawn back with an advantage. Unfortunately, after rook g6 check, there's nowhere the black king that can move to that can't be checked by the knight. It's amazing.
Right, I see, yeah. So whenever he moves, you can then check with the knight and win the rook.
That's right, with a discovered attack on the rook.
Win the rook, fantastic.
And if he goes towards c7, white goes knight d5 check, king b7, and now what's the best idea for white?
Now I want to take the rook and then take the bishop.
Good, excellent. And white actually ends up winning that bishop. The bishop that tried to evade capture ends up being captured, doesn't it?
So you can use your knight to pick off the rest of the pawns.
So really well calculated from Carlsen. And in this position it still looks pretty dangerous because that pawn looks like it's going to be lost. But knight d5 comes, and white's harmonious pieces, again we talked about that a few minutes ago, didn't we? Suddenly they all work well again.
And you can see that the black pieces aren't working as well together. You know, they're not as harmonious.
No, they're all kind of a bit scattered, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And now the key move, rook b6 check, which forces the black king away from the pawn.
Yeah.
And the king gets driven away. And again, tactics, this is excellent play from Carlsen. If he takes, what happens to win the bishop?
What happens to win the bishop? What happens to win the bishop? Oh, you can do a knight fork.
Excellent, knight d5 check, well spotted. So, you know, really top play from Carlsen, and I think that a lot of us would miss all these ideas. But it just goes to show the sort of power in the endgame. A lot of people think that, there's only a few pieces, so what's the point? There's not really much going on, it's a bit boring. But as you can see, there is a lot going on, isn't there?
There certainly is, yeah.
So bishop d4, and white eventually won a pawn. Now this is still quite dangerous for both sides, because now black eventually got this pawn going. But Carlsen level-headed as always, and he just picks off the c-pawn. Look, didn't really get that far, did it?
No.
Because two pieces are attacking it. Rook h2, and there goes the c-pawn. Although black managed to win the h-pawn, so it's still really tricky. But again, a lovely move from Carlsen. Rook's in front. If you're trying to push your own passed pawn, you want your rook in front of the pawn. Whereas if you're defending against the passed pawn, that black rook would have liked to have gone there as well to try and go. So rook a4 was a really nice move. And bishop f2, rook a3 check. And actually he resigned here, because if king e2, rook a2 check, king f1, knight e4, and eventually this bishop cannot stay on the a7 square.
Right.
If it goes here, what could white do to simplify? How can we win that pawn, Nick?
You can win that pawn. How can you win that pawn?
Can you win in this position? Actually, you can't go rook a1, but what you can do is probably just go a7. I think that the problem for black is that these pieces, as we've talked about, so badly coordinated, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're all kind of not really working well together. I think after a7, we can just win the bishop.
Yeah. And
now after h3, just finish me off here.
Well, you could bring the rook over to h7, possibly. Do you think?
Could. Any other moves? Well, actually, I've just blundered there, so...
Not sure.
Fork?
Fork.
We've got an extra knight.
Of course you can, yeah, of course. But I missed that.
The move I wanted to play was rook a1 check, and just simplify everything off. So king g2, and swap everything, and the pawn is going to charge, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
So, there we go.
Straight up there.
I don't think it actually wants to go anywhere, does it? Right. So, what can we say about the endgame? Well, I think that, the harmonious sort of the way that Carlsen put his pieces all defending each other, the way he had a kind of wait and see strategy, didn't rush the endgame, did he?
No.
and he kind of induced Radjabov to start making pawn moves that weakened his own position. So it was really, really top play by Carlsen, as you expect, of course.
Yeah.
And he's right back in this tournament now, isn't he? He's only half a point behind Karyakin, who he beat yesterday.
Yeah, Karyakin, who had that amazing start, 4 out of 4. He drew with Vishy Anand yesterday, meaning he's only half a point ahead of Magnus
That's right.
Carlsen.
So all to play for. So he might be returning to Carlsen in the future if he builds up this head of steam, as he has done over the past few games, Nick.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Lorin. Another very exciting game, and I hope you enjoyed that too. As I say, if you want to check out more information about Chess on Toast or buy any of our new DVDs, you can do. Just check out www.chessontoast.com. But for me, Nick Murphy, and International Master Lorin D'Costa, we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.